All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We're starting just after 12. Are you got a question in mind? Okay, so let's get down to work because it is time for something new. Time for Bamidbar. Exactly. We have said goodbye to the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, and now we are turning to the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, and we resume the narrative. We are getting ready to march out from Har Sinai, from the mountain of Sinai, into Bamidbar Sinai, into the wilderness of Sinai. And as far as we know at this stage, we are on a quick march to Israel. Right? At the moment, there's no talk of 40 years delay. At the moment, the plan is march from the mountain of Sinai straight to Israel. And so the first order of business is to see how many people we got, to see who's here. So they go through the census, they go through the organization of the tribes, and then we're going to get some details for how we're going to carry Sinai with us. What do I mean by that? What's that? Pack up the Mishkan, pack up the tabernacle. Because in many ways, what we were doing wasn't just carrying this fancy tent for altars. We were trying to take that experience of Sinai, that intimate presence of God, and carrying it with us as we went forward. We couldn't stay at Sinai, but we could bring the memory, we could bring that experience with us everywhere we went, and we would re-erect Mount Sinai in the middle of our camp at every new campsite. Sound good? Okay, let's go ahead and read a little bit, and then we're going to talk about one of the problems that entails. So we're going to actually start on chapter 4 of the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, which, if you are in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, is on page 782 at the very bottom of the page. Page 782, chapter 4 from the book of Numbers. Everyone set? Everyone got it? Everyone want to volunteer to read? One person want to volunteer to read? Oh, Marion got her hand up first.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, take a separate census of the Kohathites among the Levites by the clans of their ancestral house, from the age of 30 years up to the age of 50, all who are subject to service to perform tasks for the tent of meetings. This is the responsibility of the Kohathites in the tent of meeting, the most sacred objects.
Okay, so what are we going to be talking about in this section? Because we had just been moving, right? We just finished talking about the census of everyone else. And now we're talking about the subgroups among the Levi'im, the subgroups among the Levites. And we're going to work out what their jobs are. Does that make sense? All right, so the Kohathites are going to be responsible for the sacred objects. And what does that mean? Keep reading.
At the breaking of camp, Aaron and his sons shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the ark of the pact with it. They shall lay a covering of dolphin skin over it, and spread a cloth of pure blue on top, and they shall put its poles in place.
All right, what's happening?
They are.
We're going to move, and we got to move the ark. So what does that mean? Okay, so let's make sure we have a good understanding here, because what's that?
So there's very careful planning going into the move, unlike ours.
Very careful planning going into the move, unlike the Feinberg move recently to their new house. So we have the Mishkan, right? And the Mishkan is itself divided into two places. This is the actual tent. Remember, there's a big courtyard all the way around with the altar and all of that outside. But in here, this is where you have the Holy of Holies. Right? And it's where you have the Ark of the Covenant, of Raiders of the Lost Ark fame. While the curtain is up, while the Mishkan is standing, who gets to go in here?
High priest.
How often?
Once a year.
Once a year, exactly. So the Holy of Holies, this spot, is accessible to the high priest one time every year. But if we're moving either day by day or week by week or however long it takes that we're camped off in different sites, well, we can't just lift up the whole Mishkan and carry it. We can't lift the entire tent. So what happens? It has to be taken into pieces, has to be taken down, but in the process of taking it down, you can't just open up the Holy of Holies. So what they do is they have to take down the curtain, meaning now it's no longer the Holy of Holies. It's only the Holy of Holies while the curtain is up. So that lowers the sanctity level 1 degree. Then they cover the Ark of the Covenant, and then you can take down the rest. So this is a way of desanctifying this space, because after all, once they take the Mishkan apart, once they've lifted the Ark of the Covenant onto its poles, and once they've begun to march away, what happens to the dirt upon which the Mishkan was standing?
Impure. Impure?
Well, not exactly
It becomes
impure.
ordinary.
It becomes ordinary. It's whole. It's just dirt again. While it was erected, while it was standing there, it is the holiest spot on earth. Once they take it apart and carry it on, it becomes a patch of land like every other place.
Like it never existed.
That's why we don't have to worry about walking through the wilderness of Sinai, that we are treading on holy ground that the Mishkan used to be standing on. Because once it was carried on, it was desanctified. That doesn't mean it was made profane, but it does mean it was just made regular. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see if we can follow the path that all of this is happening. Marion, keep going.
Over the table of display, they shall spread a blue cloth. They shall place upon it the bowls, the ladles, the jars, the libation jugs, and the regular bread shall rest upon it. They shall spread over these a crimson cloth, which they shall cover with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put the bowls in place.
All right, so again, who's the they in all of these paragraphs? The Kohanim. The Kohanim. Not the Kohathites. They're coming later. This is Aaron and his sons. So they're going through and putting the cloth over that, and the Lechem Panim table, they're putting the cloth over that. They're going through and covering all of the sacred vessels that are inside and getting the poles ready for them to be carried. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The Kohanim are doing that. Who's going to end up carrying it? The Levites, right. The different clans of the Levites will do different jobs, but the Kohanim are the ones preparing it before it has become of a low enough sanctity level that the Levites are allowed to now take up these items.
Okay. The Kohathites are different from the Kohanim.
Correct.
The Kohathites are a clan of the Levites.
Right. Well, so are the Kohanim technically,
Right.
but they're a non-Kohanic clan.
Okay. Because it's confusing, obviously. The words sound similar.
They do, even though they look different in the Hebrew. So that, sometimes the Hebrew was actually a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay.
Why were they so specific with the color of the cloth covering, the crimson and
Why were they so specific about all the other parts of the Mishkan construction? There are mysteries upon mysteries of all of these things, and we're going to slide past that question for today.
It seems rather precarious to have all these bowls and things on top of it with just a cloth over it when they're going to be
Carrying it around by poles?
Yeah, it seems like they may fall off or something.
It's a good question. Spoken like a very practical-minded person. My guess is that they had a way of making sure things were not going to be sliding around and falling off. Exactly how that was,
Maybe they put the cloth from this dolphin skin, tightened it or something.
it certainly would have been tight enough to prevent any accidents. Maybe they had a way of stacking them in a non-precarious manner.
It's a silly question.
It's not a silly question. Trying to get a good mental image is the first step to understanding what's being discussed. Oh, yes.
By covering, it is preventing from anybody else from not repeat the accident of touching it and somebody dies.
Was not necessarily just that the covering will provide a barrier for touching, because no one else should be touching these things anyway, other than the specific groups that are supposed to be carrying them. But it's more a question of, by covering them, they are creating a barrier to the emanations of their holiness. And by doing that, the tent around them decreases in its as its covering of that holiness. It's kind of like if you have a container of let's see how well I can do this. Radioactive material. That's my radiation symbol there. So you got your container of radioactive material, right? And then you have your lead-lined room, right? This is the lab that you're doing the radiation experiments in. If you want to move your radioactive material to another lead-lined room, what do?
It should be covered.
Right, you put it in a special lead container,
Yes.
carry the container to the new room, and then take it out and do whatever experiments you want to do there. So this covering is essentially doing the same, not for radiation, but for holiness. That the holiness, which the sanctity that goes along with these items would be blocked to a certain degree by the covering, meaning that the spaces they were then traversing were not becoming holy as they walked by, and you didn't have to worry about that holiness around them until they were reset up in the new location.
And we think that at the same time, people who, at the meantime that it's being carried,
Right?
it has to be covered at the same time because people will not be able to handle the sanctity around them.
Well, certainly the Levites were not permitted to be in the Mishkan while it was in full force. So yes, the Levites wouldn't be permitted to just walk into the Mishkan, pick up the menorah, and start walking. They can only take hold of these things when they have been properly contained. Does that make sense? Yes? Maybe? Okay. I mean, this may be a notion of holiness that's a little bit different than our modern notion of holiness, where most people think of holiness as a very feel-good kind of experience, and why wouldn't you want more holiness going everywhere? But remember, for our ancestors and for us as well, we should recognize that holiness carries with it certain responsibilities and certain obligations, and if you don't want those obligations leaking out everywhere and forcing everything around to have to be in a particular state or risk rather severe punishments and penalties, then you have to contain the holiness while you're moving things.
Then they shall take a blue cloth and cover the lampstand for lighting, with its lamps, its tongues, and its fire pans, as well as all the oil vessels that are used in its service. They shall put it and all its furnishings into a covering of the dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame.
Okay. Similarly, they're going to do the next for the altar, and we're going to skip down to verse 15 to see what we do after all the coverings and preparations are done.
When Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sacred objects and all the furnishings of the sacred objects at the breaking of camp, only then shall the Kohathites come and lift them, so that they do not come in contact with the sacred objects and die. These things in the tent of meeting shall be the porterage of the Kohathites.
All right, so we got that idea? So once Aaron and his sons have everything prepared, then they move out of the way, and the B'nai Kahat come in, pick everything up, and now we're ready to march. And as we're going to see in the next parasha, which we're not looking at today, but as you read it in your own time, there are other jobs for other clans of Levites for carrying the curtains, for carrying the planks, the poles, and all the other pieces. So
Everybody has an assignment.
all the Levites have an assignment, exactly. It's not just everybody runs in and grabs something. How we doing? Okay, very good. What happened to the Mishkan? This very, very special place that we were so careful in how we put it up and how we took it down?
Once the temple was built,
The temple was built. The temple was built. And so the temple became the new site of the functions of the Mishkan. And the temple was built where? Okay, but I've been to Jerusalem. I didn't see the temple.
It was destroyed.
It was destroyed. Okay, so what happened to that spot where the temple used to be?
We have a wall.
What's that?
We have the wall. That's all we have left.
We have a wall? A wall of what?
The mount.
And the mount? And stones?
Rocks and dust.
Well, hold on a second. What day is today? Yom Yerushalayim. Today is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. And what does that commemorate? What's that? Not the destruction, that's Tisha B'Av, that comes in the summer. Oh, the retaking of the Temple Mount, or more broadly put, because it wasn't just that was retaken. Yom Yerushalayim is the day from during the Six-Day War that the old city of Jerusalem was taken by the IDF, was taken by the Israeli army, and reconnected to Jews. Between 1948 and 1967, the Jordanians were ruthless in making sure that no Jews were allowed to come into the old city. They desecrated and destroyed the Jewish quarter, and they also used the old city as a place to fire out of into the new city of Jerusalem, which was in Israel proper. And so the reunification of Jerusalem in Jewish hands and granting Jewish access was a very important milestone in Jewish history, and we commemorate it on this day of Yom Yerushalayim. But why was Jerusalem so important? I mean, we just said that the temple wasn't there. We said before that when you broke down the Mishkan and moved on, that the dirt that it used to be on wasn't so important anymore. So why should we care about Jerusalem any more than we care about Tel Aviv or Haifa or Tzfat or other cities?
King David established that, the first kingdom in Jerusalem.
Yes, King David established the first truly unified kingdom. King Saul was the king prior to that, but King David did establish his palace there and his center of government there. So that's historically interesting. The Mishkan used to be at Shiloh. Is that important?
This is the city of God.
This is the city of God?
Yes, this is where he's present.
But God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. He didn't give us the Torah at Jerusalem.
But he promised there would be a place he would appoint.
But he did mention repeatedly throughout the book of Devarim in particular that there would be a place that God would choose for his name to rest upon, which we believe to be Jerusalem. So no, let's take a look. All right. Remember, I'm trying to generate questions before we start answering them. If you don't have questions, the answers don't mean anything. All right. So, who'd like to read a little bit here? Let's talk about the importance of Jerusalem first in the conception of our ancestors.
The land of Israel sits at the center of the world. Jerusalem is in the center of the land of Israel. The temple is in the center of Jerusalem. The sanctuary is in the center of the temple. The ark is in the center of the sanctuary, and the foundation stone out of which the world was founded, it is in front of the sanctuary. Tanhuma Leviticus Kedoshim.
So this is Tanhuma, one of the collections of Midrashim. And what vision are we getting here?
Circles within circles.
Circles within circles, at least if we want to think of the world as being round, which we do. So we have the world. And what's the center of the world?
Israel.
Israel. And what's the center of Israel? And what's the center of Jerusalem? And what's the center of the temple? The sanctuary, that's the Holy of Holies. And what's the center of the sanctuary?
Holy of Holies.
Right? The ark. And what's the, wait, hold on a second.
Right, right.
And the sanctuary is the front of the sanctuary. That doesn't quite say that's not in the center anymore. And then we get the foundation stone. We'll come back to that. But first of all, what then is so important about Jerusalem? It's the center. But why is it the center, according to this?
Because that was the beginning of when the world was created.
Is that what that midrash just said?
It's the ark.
The foundation stone out of which the world was founded.
Well, out of which the world was founded is the foundation stone, but that the foundation stone, if you notice, was not the center of the actual temple, according to this. It's in front of. It's the foundation upon which it is made, but it's not quite the center. What's the center?
The ark.
The ark. Well, doesn't that mean that if there's no ark, that the Holy of Holies then isn't important? And if there's no Holy of Holies, then the temple isn't so important. And if there's no temple, then Jerusalem isn't so important. If there's no Jerusalem, then there's no Israel isn't so important. And do the last one for me.
The world is so important.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because many people stop before they get to that point. And they say, well, you know, if there's no temple, then Jerusalem's not important anymore. But if you're willing to say that, then you have to follow it along all the way down the line, which is to say, therefore, the universe isn't important anymore. If this was the focus, and it is now gone, then there really is no reason for existence.
You used circles.
Right?
At that time, there was no knowledge of the world was round.
Yes and no. It's a little bit more complicated than that. First of all, there were some ancient people who did believe that the world was round in the sense of a globe. But more commonly, people did believe the world was round, even though among those who believed the world was flat. Well, it's simple geometry. If I stand in the middle of the world and I look around, everything I can see is an equal distance from me. And when you have a center point and a line of points that is equal distant to the center point, we call that a circle. Thank you for our basic geometry. So there were a lot of people who did believe the world was round rather than square. On the other hand, there were many people who used the metaphor of from the four corners of the world really to mean that there were corners of the world. And then there were those who used the four corners of the world to refer to the four cardinal directions, which they were all very much aware of. So it's hard to know exactly how each person in the ancient world visualized their world. But doing circles is not completely beyond the realm that they would have conceived of. But it also probably wasn't universal.
For this picture, what is the world that is happening today?
Okay, let's read the next text, and then we'll talk about that.
Rabbi Eliezer says, the Shekinah did not depart from the center, but although it is laid waste, it still retained holiness. Asha said, the divine presence will never depart from the western wall, and it said, behold, he standing behind our wall.
Okay, the western wall. What are we talking about here? If you were going to point to our picture, where is this western wall that is being referred to? Well, where's north? Yeah, north is in line with the picture, going this way. Right, which means south is this way. So we've got east and west. So we know we're looking on this side of the picture. Where's our western wall?
So we don't see.
What's that? Well,
It's behind the temple.
let's see. We're got a one finger gesturing over there. So we've got an image pointing down to here. Yes. Well, where's the temple in the picture? The big building in the middle. Now, we come to a bit of an issue of translation here, because we're going to go to our top-down map now. Let's make sure we've got ourselves aligned. That's north. Okay, and so the Temple Mount, Har Habayit, is roughly rectangular, and in the ancient days, you used to have a courtyard like this. It was subdivided, put the little steps there, and then you had the temple. We got that rough draft? I remember we got north, south, east, and west. So west is definitely this way. Where is the western wall that people visit today? Is it here, the western wall of the temple? No, it is here. This is the area of the western wall, more precisely about like that. And then with the tunnels, you can go along underground a bit, which I highly recommend if you haven't had a chance to do. The western wall is down here. It is actually the retaining wall for the Temple Mount. When Solomon first built the temple, it was a little bit smaller than the temple of Herod. And when it was rebuilt by Ezra, it was smaller still. When Herod came along, he said, you know, this little sort of paltry area that's around the temple, it's not impressive enough. We need to do a little remodeling here. So he remodeled the temple, and then he also, in part of the process, expanded the top of the mountain. He built a wall and then filled it in with dirt to make the mountain a mesa, to make the mountain a giant flat top. Much, much larger than it had ever been before. In fact, in his day, this was, according to research that I've read, this was the largest man-made area, it's like a leveled out area in all of the world 2,000 years ago. No one else had ever crafted such a huge plaza that wasn't already flat when they began. You know, it's easy to make a plaza when you've got a flat area, but to build up walls and throw in all the dirt necessary to raise up and create a flat zone, that was a major feat of engineering. And in many ways a much more lasting engineering accomplishment than the temple itself. Because 2,000 years later, and the stones that Herod laid to expand the Temple Mount are still there.
So where you have darkened the wall, the courtyard to the east of that
This area,
is where they come down, people come down.
no. So the courtyard up here, some days I wish I had an overhead projector, because then I could just sort of flip down another layer. The current situation is that you have this is a very rough approximation, you have the Dome of the Rock here, and you have the Al-Aqsa Mosque down here, and you have the Western Wall Plaza here.
Where would Wilson's Arch be?
Wilson's Arch, Wilson's or Robinson's?
Wilson's.
Which one is Wilson's again? Let me do
That's it, the one in the corner. Robinson's is the one.
No, I think Wilson's Arch is the one that's actually here.
The one that you see on all the pictures.
That's Robinson's Arch.
No, that's Wilson's Arch.
South.
No, because you mean
It's
the
in
one that's on the corner.
In the corner.
That's Robinson's Arch.
Robinson's Arch is the one where they have the prayer services for those, for men and women.
But that's at the south corner.
Which is the one that you see in all the pictures?
Well, I don't know all the pictures. So
You ever see
It
a
says
picture of the wall?
if you see a picture of the wall,
Yes.
you have on one side of the plaza
It says Robinson's.
a wall with tunnels that go underneath.
Yes.
And then if you go this way, there is an earthen ramp that nowadays that leads up to the Temple Mount, to the area that's controlled by the Muslims.
Uh-huh.
And then down here, you drop 20-some feet, 20, 30 feet down to a much lower level of ground to the archaeological park.
Uh-huh.
And the area that I believe you're referring to, where there is a little bit of an arch sticking out of the wall,
Yeah, and
just like a
and
sliver.
they have dug down.
That is Robinson's Arch.
That's
It says
Robinson's.
Robinson's
Yes.
Arch.
Wilson's Arch is actually was in the middle of the Temple Mount on the western side, whereas Robinson's was at the southern end of the mount.
It says Wilson's up there and it says Robinson's down here.
It says it.
What do you call them? Robinsons and Wilsons?
Because of the different archaeologists.
Oh,
So if you're a good archaeologist, you can get stuff named after you. It's good.
oh, okay.
It's a good job. It's like if you're a good scientist, you can then find new bugs or new bacteria and get them named after you too. Well, Robinson and Wilson are the ones who discovered these different architectural features. So yes, Robinson's Arch is down here, and the ground level here is 20 to 30 feet below the Western Wall Plaza. And down here is the actual streets of the Herodian times. This is down where it was flat and at the time of Herod. So when you look up here and you look up the 60, 70 feet to the top of the Temple Mount, that's how impressive the wall was in the ancient world. And all of this has been filled in over time to make a much higher level. And in fact, it was lowered a substantial amount after the 6-Day War to create the plaza that we now see and to expose more of the wall, but they didn't go all the way down to the ground. They only went sort of halfway. So if you visit, there are shafts that you can see that show how far down the wall actually goes at the Temple Wall, the Western Wall Plaza, that they didn't excavate or push down for the plaza. They left it at that level. How are we doing on that? How are we doing on the topography? Well, we'll talk about the spirituality in a little bit more, but I want to make sure we got the topography down.
When Herod built the wall
Right.
and built it, made the maze truck, the temple was already in existence.
Correct. The second temple, which had been built during the time of Ezra and which had been slightly modified during the time of the Maccabees, was still there, and Herod expanded and glorified it.
So what did that do to the elevation of the temple?
It didn't change the temple at all. The temple was already on the highest point in the Jerusalem area, at least the part that was considered Jerusalem at the time, before people moved in the suburbs. So what it did was it raised up all the other areas around it.
So it was sort of on a hill, probably.
It was on a hill, exactly, and then everything else was raised up to its level to create this enormous plaza.
After the temple was destroyed, do we get intact most of the tunnels on the, or that is gone as well?
We don't know. We know a little bit, but we also don't know enough for a couple of very important reasons. We know a little bit because the Crusaders did some excavations of their own, and the Crusaders, in fact, dug out what is often referred to as Solomon's Stables, which are some arched passageways down in this corner, and used them as stables for their horses. Crusaders didn't necessarily care where they put their horses. But in modern times, when archaeology has actually become a sophisticated discipline, archaeologists are not allowed to excavate on the Temple Mount. The Muslim Waqf doesn't permit archaeologists to come in, and in fact, they have been quite guilty of destroying artifacts. When they want to remodel or change things up here, they just drive in their bulldozers, load things up, and throw it in the garbage.
So they're in charge of that area at this time?
Yes, under threat of civil war, of revolution and blood, because the Jewish archaeologists and secular archaeologists have said, look, just give us access to the rubbish that you throw out, or let us come in before you dig it out. We're not trying to say what you can or can't do here, although they should, because there have been some damage to the structural integrity of the Temple Mount, but they're not even permitted to come in and look. And that's a very political decision. There are many within the Palestinian territories which have worked very hard to discredit the notion that there ever was a Jewish presence in Jerusalem. And so giving us any opportunity, or even giving secular archaeologists any opportunity to show the historical presence of Jews and at this site goes against their political agenda. So they have no interest in sharing access for researchers to this material.
I read yesterday the Church of Scotland has declared that there's no proof that there's a Jewish presence.
Yeah, the Church of Scotland has issued an interesting statement late. I haven't had a chance to read it myself, but it's certainly from what I've read about it, does
Yes.
not appear to be a very helpful statement or historically accurate, to be diplomatic. I haven't read it personally, so I can't say more than that, but it's a politically charged issue. And to say that there was a Jewish temple here 2,000 years ago, many people feel would legitimize the Zionist state as they refer to Israel. And so they refuse to admit it and refuse to allow any excavation or study even that would verify that. However, all the excavation outside of this area attests quite clearly to everything that we know from our own history and from our own traditions.
Then after the war of 67,
Mm-hmm.
Israel take over Jerusalem.
Correct.
But they decide to leave the Muslims in charge.
Correct. It was a strategic decision that although Israel was now in control of all of Jerusalem, including Har HaBayit, they decided not to destroy the Muslim buildings that were there, and they decided to allow the Muslims to maintain control, authority over this space.
But is
It
it
is
the area of the
subject to Israeli law, so don't allow murders and things like that. But in terms of policies regarding the top, Israel has kept a very light hand on enforcing or implementing policies for the area of the Dome of the Rock. And we saw too many times, unfortunately, that even when Israel was doing the excavations of the tunnels along the side and along the southern area, that this would often spark riots and blood by many of the Muslims. So Israel has been trying to not create more tension than absolutely necessary.
I have a friend who was a parachute commander in
Mhm.
67, Kalani Brigade, I believe,
Mhm.
was in charge of a troop, a platoon
Right.
that was fighting in the old city at the time. And one of his colleagues was an artillery commander, this
Mhm.
is his story,
Right,
whose guns were aimed at the Dome of the Rock.
right,
And gunners had their fingers on the trigger,
right,
and they were going to blow it to smithereens, and they would hold up to it.
correct,
That was it.
correct. And
Their commanders decided to leave it intact.
and there was a very
Trigger, we would have none of these problems today.
if they pulled that trigger and destroyed the Dome of the Rock, we wouldn't have the problems we have today. We would have different problems. I can't share the optimism that would have solved everything any more than when people say, "Why don't we just blow up Mecca, and then that will solve everything?" I don't think that would necessarily solve everything. When you knock the hornet's nest out of the tree, it doesn't necessarily make everything better. In fact, usually quite the opposite. Whether or not better solutions could have been found immediately after 67 is, I think, something that we could debate. But we've got the world we live in now. Okay, how are we doing topographically? So there's a question. When it says here that the Shekhinah would never depart from the western wall, what were they talking about? Were they talking about the actual wall of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple? Were they talking about the western wall here, which would have been the back wall of the Holy of Holies? The Holy of Holies was in this part. Or were they talking about the western wall of the retaining wall? Oh. That is to say, it is unclear, because we know that the Romans dismantled the temple down to the foundation stones. That the temple itself was completely leveled by the Romans in 70 CE. They didn't level off the entire retaining wall. They didn't destroy all of that. They eventually would put their own temple on top. And so the rabbis of this period would not have seen a western wall to attribute holiness to. On the other hand, why would there be any holiness attributed to the western wall of the retaining wall? I mean, it's just an architectural feature meant to hold up dirt. This is nothing about the Mishkan. This is nothing about the holiness that we saw on the tabernacle. This is nothing about the temple itself. This was never connected to a holy spot in and of itself. What would be special about this? Well, There's a lot of speculation. One explanation is the notion that the Western Wall symbolized the ultimate authority of God over heaven and over nature. Because if you see the cycle of the sun, the moon, the stars, which direction do they go down under? Which direction are they subservient to? The west. And so it was considered to be symbolic of God's authority over all the rest of the rest of nature. That the pagans would bow to the sun in the east as it rose. We would celebrate the west. We would celebrate the acknowledgement that even the most mighty things in all of heaven and earth go down in the west under God's command. That no matter how powerful you think the sun is, it sets. And that this was meant as a symbol for our perpetual survival and the ascendancy, the son of Rome or other successive generations of conquerors or would-be conquerors would always go down. They would always set under our God. And our God would eventually bring them down, but not us. And so the Western Wall was seen to be a testimony to that it would stare out into the West where you could see history going down under God, and it would remain as a constant reminder that we would never go. Make sense? Maybe? Maybe. So, sounds good. Okay. So the Western Wall, if that was what the metaphor was meant to entail, then becomes a symbol of the eternity of our survival despite the destruction, rather than a remnant of what once stood that was holy.
To bring it from this big a
Perspective.
down to something like this, having been there,
Mm-hmm.
the presence of the Lord, the Shekinah, is there. There's no way to doubt it. Even non-Jews come away and say, "Wow," because it's almost almost tangible.
So,
The presence of the Lord there.
is there a holiness still there?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Let's ask this rhetorically for a second. So one answer is from our own personal experiences, is that yes, there is something there. There are others, on the other hand, that argue it's a retaining wall. It's a retaining wall. And even among those who long for the restoration of the full control of the Har Habayit, who long for the days of Mashiach when the third temple would be built, don't necessarily idolize the Western Wall itself. And they do so with some pretty good pedigree, because the temple itself was often idolized in ways that made our faith uncomfortable. And the idolization of the Western Wall can sometimes border on that as well. So in the interest of time, I'm going to read this passage from the prophet Jeremiah. Where in the timeline of Jerusalem did Jeremiah live? Ooh, got to work on our history. What's that?
Babylonian exile.
Babylonian exile. He saw the coming of Babylon, he saw the destruction, and then he lived in its immediate aftermath for just a very short while. So this is somebody who saw the city of Jerusalem on the brink and in disaster. This is someone who saw the first temple fall. So this is what he says as God tells him to. This is the Lord's message to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, stand at the gate of the Lord's house. That means stand at the temple gate. Teach this message at the gate. Hear the message from the Lord, all you people of the nation of Judah, the southern kingdom that was still there. Remember, the northern kingdom was already gone. All you who come through these gates to worship the Lord, hear this message. Right, he's talking to people that have chosen to come to Jerusalem, who have chosen to come to the temple to worship God. And this is what he says to them. The Lord all-powerful, the God of Israel, says, change your lives and do good things. Well, they're coming to the temple. And he's telling them to change their lives? To do good things? I thought coming to the temple was a good thing. I mean, imagine if I stand at the front door to the synagogue and you're coming on Shabbat, and I say, you all got to change. Well, what do you mean? We're the ones that are here. We're the ones doing the good stuff, right? Change your lives. If you do this, I will let you live in this place. Meaning, still in Jerusalem. Don't trust the lies that some people say. They say, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Why would they be saying that over and over again? They were saying it's safe. This is God's temple. What, you think God's going to blow up his own house just because he's angry at us? God would never be so stupid to blow up his temple just because we're transgressing. So therefore, you can do what you want because we're protected by the temple. The temple provides us security against our own transgressions and God's punishment because the temple's here, yay, we're safe. If you change your lives and do good things, I will let you live in this place. You must be fair to each other. You must be fair to strangers. You must help widows and orphans. Don't kill innocent people. And don't follow other gods because they will only ruin your lives. If you obey me, I will let you live in this place. I gave this land to your ancestors for them to keep forever. But you are trusting lies that are worthless. Will you steal and murder? Will you commit adultery? Will you falsely accuse other people? Will you worship the false god Baal and follow other gods that you have not known? If you commit these sins, do you think you can stand before me in this house that you call by my name? Do you think you can stand before me and say, we are safe, just so you can do all these terrible things? This temple is called by my name. Is this temple nothing more to you than a hideout for robbers? I have been watching you. This message is from the Lord. He's saying, you think you can just go out and do whatever you want, but as long as you're standing in the shadow of the temple, I can't touch you? This is, your safe base while playing tag? That because it's the temple, I won't lay a finger on you at the risk of damaging my own house? Really? You think that that's what this house is? It's just a safe zone that I won't touch? You people of Judah, want to know? Go now to the town of Shiloh. Go to the place where I first made a house for my name. What house was erected in Shiloh? The Mishkan. The Shiloh was the longest place where the Mishkan dwelt during the time between entering the land of Israel and the establishment of the temple. Go there. The people of Israel also did evil things. Go and see what I did to that place because of the evil they did. You people of Israel were doing all these evil things. This message is from the Lord. I spoke to you again and again, but you refused to listen to me. I called to you, but you did not answer. So I will destroy the house called by my name in Jerusalem. I will destroy that temple as I destroyed Shiloh. And that house in Jerusalem that is called by my name is the temple you trust in. I gave that place to you and to your ancestors. I will throw you away from me, just as I threw away all your brothers from Ephraim. I gave it to you, I can take it away. I didn't give it to you as a place to hide from me. I gave it as a place for you to meet me. And if you're going to use it only as a hiding place and go there thinking you're safe, rather than changing your behavior, then I will remove your hiding place, and you will have nowhere left to hide. Jeremiah was fairly rough. We get the picture? So, when people treat the Western Wall as being a security, as being somehow a symbol that everything must be okay or everything will be okay, regardless of what happens, I'm not entirely sure Jeremiah agrees with that. And although we may feel the presence of God there, although it may trigger a very special spiritual feeling, the notion that therefore there is some holiness in that site that protects it, regardless of what we do, I think is a bit mistaken. Just as to acknowledge there was holiness in the temple, and that didn't save it when push came to shove and the bill came due for our behavior. How we doing? Maybe? I know it's a bit of a downer on Yom Yerushalayim to imagine these things, but we imagine these things so that we can prevent them. Because if we don't protect Jerusalem, if we don't protect Jerusalem by maintaining what should be our treatment of each other, and Jeremiah gave us a very nice list, a short list of some of the things that we need to make sure we're taking care of, we could lose it again. Just as God gave it to us in 67, it could disappear again if we blow it.
Well, they didn't learn from history because when they tried to use the ark to win a war,
Mm-hmm.
they lost the ark.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Philistines captured the ark, and we got it back eventually. But yes, it was not. It did not provide us the protection. But people are always much more willing to believe that a place or an item will provide them the security they desire, rather than bothering to live the way the place and the item have suggested we should be living. It's much easier to say, I'm carrying the Torah, I'm safe, rather than I'm living the Torah, so I will be safe. It may seem awkward to carry a Torah, but judging by people's behavior, they seem to think that living Torah is even more awkward. And wanting to have that sense of security from an item is very natural. Now, there are people who treat the mezuzah on their door as though it were an amulet. You see them putting mezuzahs in their cars or mezuzahs around their neck as though they can use the same prophylactic power of the mezuzah no matter where they are. I'm not saying you're not allowed to have one, but if you're using it only as an amulet, you might want to reconsider that. If you're using it just as a reminder of God, reminders are good. But if you're using it because you think that you'll avoid accidents if you have a mezuzah in your car, I'm afraid that's not going to work. Okay, we're going to just skip the little teaching here from Zevachim, talking about the importance of Jerusalem as being our inheritance, and the places that we have dwelt as being, and Shiloh as being our place of rest. And we're going to skip down to Psalm 122. Psalm 122 is traditionally recited on Yom Yerushalayim. It's nice to have traditions, even if they're only a few decades old, because it reminds us of the importance, the centrality, and what we need to do. So I'm going to ask first that we read it together, and then we'll do a little talk about that psalm. So, we ready to go? Good. A song of ascents of David. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go, the tribes of the Lord, to the testimony of Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. For thrones are set there in judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls, prosperity within your palaces. For the sake of my brethren and companions, I will now say, peace be within you. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. What does this tell us about Jerusalem? Of when she will be at peace? What are the defining characteristics of Jerusalem that make this our aspiration?
Peace is within us.
When peace is within us, when we are together, when we are yachdav, as we say, a city that is compact together, a city that is united, that is as one, that it is when it is a place that is there for justice, a place of judgment, when it is a place that has fair and honest leadership, represented here by the thrones of the house of David. That is the peace of Jerusalem that we seek. Not just a stone wall, not just a stone building that was the house of God. When we talk about the house of the Lord our God, we're not just saying it would be nice to have the temple again. We're saying it would be nice to live in the world where the temple means what it should. Not the world of Jeremiah where the people took the temple as a hideout for bandits, but that where people respected the idea that the temple represented. When the people respected the Torah, when they respected the covenant, when they respected what it meant to live a sacred and meaningful life, not just at the temple, but emanating outwards. Then Jerusalem will go back to being the center of the entire world, and it will radiate outwards peace that can be shared with everyone around. But the first step, of course, we have to have peace among our own people in Jerusalem. And I know some of us may think that is an impossible dream, but it's always within our grasp. Remember, all we have to do is simply sit, talk, listen, and be willing to understand that there is more than one type of Jew in the world. We have to accept the others, and they have to accept us, and we have to recognize that that is what the call of Jerusalem begins as. And if we are able to make peace amongst ourselves, then we will be the center of the world again. And by extension, the world will actually have a reason to exist. As at the moment, as we continue to spin and spin and spin without a center, what good does this world do? But a little shift of focus, we'll be back on track. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Hopefully everyone will find their own way to celebrate Yom Yerushalayim for the rest of the day, if you have not done so already. And reminder that next week there won't be any class because it'll be Shavuot. But that doesn't mean that you're off the hook, because it's Shavuot. So there's lots of other good things to be doing on Shavuot other than this particular class. In particular, I invite everyone who would like to join us on the evening of Shavuot, the first night, Erev Shavuot. We will have our Mariv service at 7:30, and we will follow that up with a study session, a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, where we are going to read from the first chapter of every book of the Bible. And we'll see how close to the morning that takes us. But you're welcome to come for part, you're welcome to come for all. But if you've never had a chance to see the flow of the Tanakh from beginning to end, this might be a good opportunity. All right, hope to see everyone at least on Shabbat, hopefully for Shavuot, following week Shabbat, and then we'll be back for class again. Okay, good.
Thank you.